We'll bring in Neal McCready, rebelgrove.com. Neal, we appreciate the time, man. I know, as always, everybody's busy, so we definitely appreciate it. How's it going?
It's going good, Wes. Chris, talked to Chris earlier today for our pregame show, so glad to be with you guys.
Yeah, man, we definitely appreciate it. I know y'all. You're a vet on. I mean, you have more podcasts, I think, than anybody on the entire network. So some people we have to sort of coach up on StreamYard and all this different stuff. But you look like you are locked in and ready. Do you just stay on StreamYard or Zoom all day long, basically?
Basically, I'm on StreamYard. I use Zoom. I use Ecamm. I use Adobe Audition. I'm pretty hip as it pertains to technological stuff here lately. My two teenage daughters are sometimes occasionally impressed, so that's a win, you know.
Definitely, man. So, all right, let's dive into this game. Obviously, like we were just talking about, we don't get to see Ole Miss a whole lot, but the broad takeaway has been, man, they are really good on offense, and man, they've had some struggles on defense. Maybe some signs they're improving on that side of the ball from what I've read. But first of all, I guess big picture, what has Lane Kiffin sort of brought to this program? What have your early impressions been just as his impact in general on the Ole Miss program since he's come in?
Yeah, you know, Wes, it's interesting because what you would love to see from just a curiosity standpoint is what this would have looked like if there hadn't been a pandemic. If there had been, the ability to bring the recruits in. They intended, best laid plans and all that. Their plan was to be very aggressive in the early portion of the recruiting period. They were going to bring in a ton of guys in March and April. And I know everybody goes, well, everybody does that. They were going to use a bunch of their official visits in April. They were going to maybe half of their official visits. They were going to turn, the spring game into a major recruiting event from an official visit standpoint. They were going to take advantage of, like South Carolina has. Ole Miss has a pretty successful baseball program in terms of draw and that kind of thing, big crowds and all that stuff. And they were going to use that to their advantage because they were going to try to really energize the program. And the early signs in late January, early February was that this was going to have, a modicum of success and that it might actually kind of work. They might be able to build preseason momentum in recruiting where even if your team sucks, the kids are like, yeah, I'm bought in now. I've bought the bumper sticker and the T-shirt, if you will. Well, that didn't happen, obviously. And so he didn't have any spring and recruiting got shut down. Hell, recruiting's still shut down for everybody. So which frankly is for schools that are thinking about maybe making a change or not. That's something they actually have to think about, but I digress. What he's done is he's brought a ton of energy into the program. He has this unique sort of dichotomy of personalities. There's the Lane Kiffin that's on Twitter, which is kind of crazy. And then there's this really laid back Lane Kiffin that talks to us. And then there's this different guy that I think communicates to kids and players that they really like. So they've had a lot of success, but you don't really know because you're recruiting via Zoom. You're trying to, they've said all along, hey, we are not going to take kids just to take kids. We're not going to take kids just because he's from Mississippi. If we don't think they can play, we're not going to take them. And so they're recruiting, they're like 50th or something in the country. And so some fans are up in arms, but Lane's very open about how he's going to build a roster. He talks about doing it NFL style, meaning, you obviously you draft some, you do free agency some. And he's always said, hey, this transfer thing's going to happen and it's going to be wild. And they've had some success with transfers. Kenny Yeboa comes to mind. So I think you'll see them active in that. But what he's done is he's made them relevant. I mean, Ole Miss is 2-4. 2-4. Now they had a couple of their four were interesting. They played Florida well, and they went toe to toe with Alabama for the better part of 3 3/4 quarters. And they were fun. They've been fun to watch. But they're still 2-4. And yet when you turn on game day or whatnot, they're always talking about Ole Miss because they're talking about Lane Kiffin. He's on the Dan Patrick show. He's on Barstool with those guys. If he doesn't really need local media much, and some of the local media get kind of frustrated because they're used to having their heads patted and told how important they are. This guy doesn't need us. And so you have to kind of get creative with how you talk to him. But if he wants to get attention, guys, he just calls up national guys. and he's on their shows. He's on Dan Le Batard because he can be funny, and he can talk about fishing, and he can talk about all these different things, and he tells funny Saban stories, and he's a great quote. Like just the other day, he's asked about, because Ole Miss is one of 3 schools in the league, along with South Carolina and Arkansas, that are on schedule as of this moment from a COVID standpoint. And he was, yeah, I know. He kind of took some shots at LSU a little bit, Mississippi State a little bit. Like, yeah, some teams I'm not sure they really want to play. They're kind of using injuries, and it's just jabs, and he was asked about this text chain that he's in with Will Muschamp and Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt, and he's like, yeah, it hadn't been very active lately. They all lost last week, and it's just jabs, and it's funny, and yet it's kind of, it's good natured, and I don't know that any of those guys despise him. It was the funniest part of the whole Alabama week was everybody was like, oh, Saban hates Kiffin and he's going to be out to get him. And as that week went on, it's like, Saban doesn't hate Kiffin at all. They like each other. It's funny, so he's made them relevant. He's made them fun. I think fans are excited. They're energized. And yet on the flip side, it's a results business. And no one faults him for what's happening on the field right now with defense and stuff like that. But guys, if this dead period doesn't get lifted, and I think it got extended today through the middle of April, if this dead period doesn't get lifted at some point, I don't know how you go about rebuilding your roster.
Yeah. So one thing, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but I've got to ask, because you brought up the different personalities that Lane presents. Yesterday, that was yesterday, right, Wes?
Yeah.
Wes played.
It was Monday's press conference, but yesterday.
Monday's presser that he played yesterday. It was like the worst, most dry press conference ever. I mean, ever. Is Lane is he trolling people by doing that? Is he like, I'm just gonna be as boring as possible, or is that serious, his press conference mode? Or
so it's this, and God, I'm making more and more enemies. I have so many enemies in media after the last 9 months, so why not make a few more, right?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
He does not like Coach, could you tell me about the tight end situation behind Yeboa? I was wondering if you might break that down. Or, Coach, I noticed you've had some trouble with kicking. Have you thought about making a change there with your kickers? Coach, could you break down what you see with South Carolina's defense? He doesn't like that stuff. He's not going to give you personnel. He's not going to tell you who's hurt. He'll answer the COVID stuff. And I think sometimes with a few of us that are we think the COVID thing's a little overplayed. I think he agrees, and he'll give us a little bit there. But if you ask him about, hey, I know you went fishing. Did you catch anything? You'll get an answer. He'll tell you about that. If you ask him about, hey, what do you think about this contact tracing stuff, the way this is done? He'll give you this very long, thought out answer. But if it's this Monday, let's reflect on the past game and let's look ahead to this game, he's not going to do all that, because, look, he's not going to say, look, if it works for me here, this is my worst team. If it works for me here, no one's ever going to remember this season other than the COVID stuff. But I'm not going to throw these kids under the bus because it's not their fault. And so he's not going to do all that. So, yeah, sometimes the press conferences are really dry. And you guys know this with Zoom. You don't have that human interaction. It's still a screen, and it's very regimented, and you ask your question, then the next person asks his question. And so sometimes he's just not very good. I've had a couple of funny moments with him where he got fined after Ole Miss and Auburn. The officials missed a call that would have given Ole Miss an 8-point lead, assuming the extra point, which with Ole Miss is an assumption. But I'll go ahead and assume the extra point. It would have given Ole Miss an 8-point lead with 5:20 to go, and they didn't even review it. And it was on the heels of Auburn getting a break against Arkansas.
Yeah.
And Kiffin retweeted a tweet, and he got fined. And so he put out a thing about penny lane, on Twitter. And I asked him how many pennies have showed up at the Manning Center, which is where their football offices are located. And he gave a real funny answer to that. He was like, I was waiting for someone to ask that. You guys took 2.5 minutes. You're getting slow. And he's like, Neal, you didn't even care about the other answers. You were just waiting for this. And I was kind of like, yeah. And, and So he can be funny. He can be really good. And you hear him like with Barstool and those kind of guys. He's great, but that's a different format. Like he would be good in this format with the four of us, assuming that we all sort of agreed, hey, we're not going to break this damn game down. We're gonna talk about other stuff. We're gonna talk about big picture. We're gonna try to find out some dirt on Will Muschamp. You know, what's something he's done when maybe he had a beer too many or whatever when they were out someplace. And he'll go there and be great. But if you start diving into hardcore football, unless you want to talk about like calling plays or going for it on fourth down or things that he's learned or stuff like that, he'll do that all day.
Yeah.
So with that said, let's dive into this game. But no, so tell us, I mean, you see this offense every week, obviously. I mean, God, it seems like from quarterback, there's two guys. Obviously, Jerrion Ely at running back. That was somebody I followed during recruiting. Stud. And then Elijah Moore catches like 10 balls a game, I guess, literally. So, how good is this offense compared to some of the ones? I mean, it seems like we were just talking about 2018 going down there and watching that offense for Ole Miss. That was a really dadgum good offense too. So how does it compare, and what have been the differences maybe with Lane and those guys running it versus the old crew?
You know, that 2018 offense doesn't get enough credit for how good it was or how good it could have been from a talent standpoint. They had DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, Dawson Knox, who's a starting tight end for the Bills now. Van Jefferson was on that team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
God.
Jordan Ta'amu was the quarterback, and Jordan, I think, is still on the Chiefs roster right now. I mean, obviously, he's not going to beat out Mahomes, but you know, he's good enough to wear an NFL practice jersey. And they had Greg Little on that team, and they had some linemen and stuff. I mean, they were solid. This offense is really, it's kind of different because it's a little more balanced than that one. That one just threw it and threw it and threw it. This one's going to be balanced. Chris was talking about this on my show earlier. You know, everybody talks about Lane Kiffin and how he's wide open and blah, blah, blah. Man, they've beat people with running backs this year. You mentioned Ely. Snoop Connors had a terrific season. I mean, he's a really dynamic back between the tackles. He'll get after you. They're good up front. Royce Newman at tackle just got invited to the Senior Bowl. Kenny Yeboa, the tight end from Temple, transferred in, has been terrific. And then you mentioned Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore may have impacted more football programs in one game. I mean, you think about how different the state of Mississippi is if Elijah Moore just hands the ball to the official at the end of the Egg Bowl. He does the little dog pee thing, and he gets the penalty, and then they miss the kick, and that basically gets Matt Luke fired. And Mississippi State intended to fire Moorhead. They win the game. The chancellor gets all emotional about it, decides to keep him, and then their program implodes over the course of the next month, and they end up with Mike Leach. I mean, that's a lot of stuff that happens after just one unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. But he's really good. He's such a difficult guard in the slot because you really can't put a strong safety on him or a linebacker on him because he runs such clean routes. He really understands the game, and then he can beat you with his speed too. He's gone this season. I mean, Ole Miss people are like, you think he's coming back? I'm like, no, he's not coming back. Why in God's name would he come back? I mean, he's an NFL caliber receiver, and they have a couple other guys that have been inconsistent. Jonathan Mingo will have a really good game and then disappear, and then have a really good game and disappear. So you know, that's kind of what you expect from young receivers. He'll do that. I think he's got a chance to have a pretty good career here. He's just got to get a little steadier. And then Matt Corral's been the story. You know, Matt Corral a year ago lost his job, wasn't very good. He got hurt. When he came back, he lost his confidence, was a turnover machine. The knock on him was that he just couldn't make good decisions. And I think this is where Lane Kiffin as a coach is underrated. And that is his ability to take a quarterback, whoever that quarterback is, whether it's Sims at Alabama or Jake Coker or Jalen Hurts or the kid at FAU who put up great numbers, and now Corral, take them and say, okay, what's your strength? What's your weakness? I'm going to kind of figure out a way to hide your weakness or use it just enough to keep coordinators honest. And then I'm going to build up your strength. And with Corral, the one big, weakness that he had was not great decision maker. And I think he simplified those decisions. Now, the one team that got him this year, ironically, was Arkansas. and they didn't do a lot of complicated stuff. They rushed 3, they dropped 8, and Corral was coming off of a huge game against Alabama where he was awesome. He was great against Alabama. I mean, he scared the hell out of them. But he got away with a couple of throws against Alabama, and he got into his head, oh, see, I can make these throws. And Arkansas basically laid the trap, and he fell into it. They threw 6 picks, could have been 8. I mean, it was a disaster. But he came back from that. I'll tell you the sign of his maturity, and I think it's a sign of Kiffin's coaching ability. They come back and they play Auburn immediately after the Arkansas game. Ole Miss's first drive, they get down into the red zone. It's like the 7-8 yard line. I don't remember exactly where. And he throws a pick. And you could see just him kind of melting down a little bit. And they brought Plumlee in for a series, but then they brought him back, and he was really good the rest of the Auburn game. And then he just tore Vanderbilt apart, which you don't know what to read into that because Vanderbilt is atrocious. So you don't know whether that's just him taking advantage of them or whether he built some confidence. But Corral's got a really good arm. There's also, it's that, everybody talks about arm talent, whatever that means. He's got it. He can make all the throws. He can throw the deep ball. He can throw with touch. When he gets going, he'll build. He's one of those guys that has a lot of emotion. He'll build off that emotion. He's better with his feet than he gets credit for, but he's still a little susceptible to trying to do a little too much as a young quarterback, and that's burned him a couple of times. But hey, listen, when you look at his numbers and you throw out that one game, just toss the Arkansas game, which I know it doesn't work like that, but if you do, his other 5 games, his numbers are really solid.
Neal, as tempted as I am to take it in another direction and get off this game, which we will do, we do have to ask about the defense a little bit. Ole Miss, primarily, I would imagine, talent issue, probably.
Yeah.
On that side of the ball.
Yeah, they're slow and they're small, and they've got a handful of guys that aren't terrific with assignment. And in this league, that's not the greatest combination.
I was about to say that's a great combo.
Right.
They've improved a little bit here down the stretch. They were okay against Arkansas on defense. They were okay at times against Auburn, and they were pretty solid for the most part, especially against the run against Vanderbilt. But again, it's Vanderbilt.
Right.
So I don't know. Look, South Carolina's been able to run the football this season, and I would think they're going to be able to run the football against Ole Miss. It's going to be DJ Durkins, the defensive coordinator, the former Maryland coach. Some people here have criticized his schemes and whatnot. I've actually thought schematically they were pretty solid. Sometimes you're asking people to do things and they can't do it, and you do the best you can. I think he's kind of figured out what does work. I think he's kind of figured out what doesn't work. So they're not doing as much. But look, they're not some dynamic defense. They're not going to roll out there Saturday and throw some sort of a shutout against South Carolina or Oxford High School or anybody else. They're not that good on defense. I expect there will be a kind of a wholesale change personnel-wise defensively next season.
So matchup-wise, man, I guess as y'all have sort of dove into this game on your end, what are you watching for? I mean, is there anything that sort of stands out to you or anything else about Ole Miss we sort of just need to know as far as this game goes?
I mean, I think they're going to try to run tempo. They're going to want to get South Carolina to have to play catch up where you're tempted to get out of your run and to go to your, if you have 3 quarterbacks, you don't really have any. And so you're doing that deal where you want to get in their heads a little bit and you got quarterbacks trying to make plays happen because they're trying to win a job and they're trying to stay on the field. And obviously that's what Ole Miss would love to do. It's not complicated. You'd love to get them into 3rd and long and maybe make them make a couple of mistakes, get South Carolina to commit a couple of turnovers. You build a double-digit lead and you're making them play from behind. And that's probably Ole Miss's path to a, quote, easy win. On the other side, I'm not convinced they can stop anybody. Look, they didn't stop Arkansas. I mean, a lot of Ole Miss fans were like, all right, you gave that game away and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, man, Arkansas they beat you at the line of scrimmage pretty much the whole game. And so, there's a lot there. I mean, if you told me it was a high-scoring game, I'd buy it. If you told me Ole Miss won by 11, 12 points, I'd buy that too. And if you told me that this game's really close at the end, I'd buy that. I mean, they're just when Ole Miss is kind of what it is through 6 games. They're very good on offense. They score points. They can score points quickly. They can score points in bunches, but they can give them up quickly too. And they've gotten a little better at that. And they're coming off an open date, but we'll see. I mean, I just don't have any faith that defense is going to roll out and stifle an SEC opponent.
All right, so as I promised, I wanted to take it away a little bit. Now, I'm not necessarily tying this to South Carolina, but Hugh Freeze is going to come up a lot, right? And I know we could probably stay on this call or whatever you want to call it for hours.
Days.
About with your experience covering Hugh Freeze. Yep. But in a general sense, Hugh Freeze is going to come up for a lot of jobs in the SEC, maybe beyond this year, next year, whenever it may be. Just tell us about what can somebody expect when Hugh Freeze gets back into the SEC? What do people need to know?
Okay, first of all, he's a really good coach.
Yeah.
He's proven to be very good at Arkansas State, at Ole Miss, at Liberty, of walking into a situation, getting kids to play hard for him, probably overachieving early. He does some hokey stuff, but I think hokey stuff can work early. I covered Houston Nutt. It was really hokey, and it worked at first. Now, the problem for Freeze is, does he have the coaching network to put together the kind of staff that you have to have at a place like South Carolina that is going to let you recruit at the kind of level that he needs to recruit to win there, where you play Florida every year and you play Georgia every year and you got to play Clemson at the end of every year? I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but it's different than when you're at Liberty and, you're going to play Western Kentucky and you're going to play Austin P, and then you're going to mix in a game at Syracuse, then you're going to get a couple others, then you know what I mean? It's different. You're not playing, there's no Florida International on the South Carolina SEC schedule. So he's got to put a staff together, and I'm not convinced he can. I thought it was the beginning of his downfall at Ole Miss was he lost a couple of coaches and really couldn't replace them. The NCAA thing here, I don't think is a big deal. He didn't really do anything. They didn't cheat the way that they got accused of cheating. Now, did they probably try? Sure. But that they didn't have the network to get that done. I mean, there's a reason that, on, I guess, 4 out of the 5 signing days here, it was mostly disappointment at the end. You lose. They were losing guys to other SEC schools. So you get that. You're going to get kind of, like I said, some of the hokey stuff. He refuses to stop playing up the religion part with him. And I'm not saying it's disingenuous, but for some people it's a turnoff. And then also, when you play that card, you've got to live up to it. And I don't know him. I haven't talked to him in years. I'll leave it at this. I'm a big fan of Columbia. It's a cool town. I mean, every time I go there, I'm like, man, this place rocks. I like this place. But there's places to get in trouble there. It's been my experience. And, I mean, it's a fun, if you want to go have fun in Columbia, you can. That's been my experience. I mean that as a compliment. And much like Oxford's that way. If you want to go have some fun in Oxford, you can do it. I don't know that you could probably hide it in Lynchburg better than you could hide it in Oxford. And certainly you could hide it in Oxford better than you could hide it in Columbia, is my guess. So he's going to have to have that cleaned up, but he's a good coach. He'd be okay with media. He's really thin-skinned. It's why when people have talked about him going to like an Alabama or a place like that, I'm like, man, I don't know. But, I don't know I know what you guys are like. I don't know really what the rest of the media landscape is there, especially in the modern media where all the newspapers have basically gone out of business and what it looks like. So, he'd be okay. He'd be, in my eyes, if I'm South Carolina, I would view him as high risk, high reward. There's a ceiling, but there's a floor, and that floor could be a deep floor.
So I asked in the chat if anybody had any questions. I'm hoping this is not some like Urban Dictionary thing that I have no idea what this means. I think this is maybe one of your Ole Miss people that's logged on. He says, ask Neal about potato logs. Does that mean anything to you?
That's just, it's just our Our podcast, we've been doing this podcast every day, the Oxford Exxon podcast, for about, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years. I really have, honest to God, lost track. I guess it's about 8 years. And, the Oxford Exxon's our sponsor. So people, which is actually the people that own 48 blue sky locations all over the Southeast. But we called it the Oxford Exxon podcast, I think in large part because we really didn't think it was ever going to take off and be anything. And so people envision just, you walk into a convenience store and you get a couple of chicken tenders and a potato log. And so we would start calling it the little potato log podcast that could, because we'd get guests and stuff. And it's just kind of it. Some of the guys that cover Mississippi State would when they would try to belittle us, they would say we were just the potato log podcast. So rather than fight back, we just sort of embraced it.
You got to sort of lean into something like that. I feel like.
Yeah, it's just kind of, just if that's the worst thing you ever get called, you're going to be okay.
That's right.
True. You got anything else, Chris?
No, I'm good, man.
Let's see. Kyle Foster on the chat wants to know if you can talk a little bit more about Kenny Yeboa and just sort of what he means to that offense. I guess the other guys probably get a little more notice, but Yeboa, I guess, has been really good for you guys too.
Yeah, man, he's going to play in the league. That's for sure. Assuming he can stay healthy. He's big, 6'5"-ish, maybe a little bigger than that. Probably 230 or so. Runs well. Good hands. Blocks okay, and they've got a couple of guys behind him that are good blockers, so they can kind of use him in different ways. They can use him in the slot. They can use him tight. He's just really versatile. He can do a lot of things. If you watch a lot of NFL, you see guys like Kenny Yeboa making big bucks in league, and I think he will. Ole Miss got lucky there because he was going to go to Baylor, and I guess Rule left for the Panthers, and when that opened up, because he'd played for Rule at Temple, and then Rule went to Baylor. And so he was going to go finish his career with the previous coaching staff. And then when they left for the Panthers, he was looking for a home. And I guess, one of the Baylor coaches was coming to Ole Miss. And so, he jumped on that opportunity. And, boy, it's worked out really well for everybody.
Neal, final question. Let's go completely away from football, man. I know you're into all types of different things. So, random question. What are you watching on Netflix these days?
I'm still finishing up Schitt's Creek. It's taking me a little while.
Great show, though.
It's a great show, and you know what? It's been funny how that's worked out because. So I've got 3 kids. My oldest is a sophomore at the University of Arkansas, and she was having a terrific freshman year. Just loved it. And the pandemic was bad, for mental health and stuff, and. So, we had that and then, kids at home and fighting over Wi-Fi, and it kind of got dark a little bit, during the pandemic times. And so people were like, watch Ozark and stuff. And so I watched some of Ozark, but I'm like, now I'm just kind of thinking about like hurting myself. And so I'm like, I need to put that away. And I stumbled into Schitt's Creek, and it is so funny. And I'll save episodes for when I'm kind of having a little dark time coming over me a little bit. And it's great. The writing on that show is freaking fantastic, and you just start laughing. I'm on the last season, and I'm trying to really milk it now. I'm trying not to binge it.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that, and there's a story there. So Rivals Conference, it's been a while ago, and I think this was you, Neal, because I did not know you yet. But I was in the gym at the hotel at the Rivals Conference.
And I was probably marathon training at the time.
Do what?
I was probably training for a marathon at that time.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm just in there trying to get a little workout. And this guy to my right is just dying laughing at something, dying laughing. And then finally, I think he saw me sort of look over there, and he's like, still mid-laugh. He's like, sorry, man, this Arrested Development Season 5 is just awesome.
Yeah.
But he was about to fall off the treadmill laughing at Arrested Development.
I actually watched the whole series while I was training for a marathon. I almost blew my knee out on a treadmill so many times laughing because that show is so ridiculously stupid that it's great. You know what I mean? But that's kind of my thing. Like I watch Breaking Bad and all that stuff, and sometimes that dark stuff, I guess just the way my mind works, that it kind of gets to me a little bit. And so, I mean, I'll watch The Office 3 times a year, so That and Arrested Development and Schitt's Creek and stuff. That's sort of my cup of tea.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Well, good stuff, Neal. As always, dude, we appreciate the time. Y'all keep doing what you're doing, and we'll talk to you soon, okay, man?
Okay, guys, y'all be good.
Yeah, check them out at rebelgrove.com if y'all want to sort of read the Ole Miss perspective and check out their podcast as well. Go see it right now, rebelgrove.com. Neal, we'll talk to you soon, man.